we had a joint address to Congress last night, and maybe there are thoughts that the rhetoric surrounding tariffs would perhaps ease a little bit, and maybe it has to the sense that hey, we're going to do these reciprocal type of tariffs. But Professor Soydemir, what were your thoughts on what happened with these tariffs? The fact that they went into effect yesterday, and the fact that it doesn't seem like they're going to be taken away really anytime soon.
Well, it's created a growth scare along with fears of resurgence in inflation. So, the fears of stagflation came back. You know, we had the terrible years in 1970s when we observed stagflation, and now there's fear out there that the economy may slow down, and because of higher prices resulting from tariffs, that inflation may start increasing again. Yeah, yeah.
Right, and I think that's the biggest concern for many Americans and for the Central Valley. I mean, are there concerns with crops and the potential of tariffs affecting crops and farmers throughout the Central Valley here?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this is the area that's going to be among the worst that'll be affected, along with, the drought, the impact of tariffs, retaliation, and then we have mass layoffs. All of that is going to have a bearing on our region here. I mean, if we look at Institute of Supply Management's new orders, for the first time in 5 years, it has gone down by the most, I mean, the highest. So those new orders, that's a leading indicator that moves before any other variable moves. So now everybody is watching that those leading indicators very carefully. So yeah, go ahead.
Oh yeah, well, in that with those indicators that they're looking at too, I mean, what do we I guess export to Canada from the Central Valley or Mexico too from the Central Valley? What are we sending their way?
We're exporting agricultural goods, processed food, beverages, meat, fruits, and grains. But I know at the same time we are importing those goods, some of the agricultural goods as well, like tomatoes and things like that. So it's going to work both ways. But definitely, I mean, since we're importing agricultural goods, meat and dairy, I mean, they're talking about the valley there. I mean, the valley is going to be adversely affected by that, resulting from retaliation.
And would we expect, I guess, the grocery store prices to continue to remain high if this were the case?
Well, if not increasing, it will definitely continue to remain high. Uh, and then there will be ripple effects. I mean, there's going to be, companies have already started laying off workers resulting from mass layoffs because government employment constitutes 20% of total employment in the valley. So it's a huge driver, economic driver in the valley, government employment.
What do you make of the argument that the Trump makes about we don't need quite that many government workers. There's some departments that there's just plain waste. Does that have an impact on us here, or is that more like state government jobs through the Central Valley as opposed to what kind of waste he's talking about?
Well, I mean, we're talking about government workers like IRS, parks, and recreation. So, I mean, all of these definitely have an impact in California. I mean, from the federal layoffs, and then of course as I mentioned earlier, the resulting multiplier effects that private companies, having rational expectations, are already taking positions to cover their losses and laying off workers, and they're not waiting. I mean, they're taking action now, and that's why we're seeing a decline in growth scares and economy beginning to drag, with the labor market. So all of that is having an impact now uh, in the valley.
Right, and I think that's something that people are keeping their eyes on. when they're going to the grocery store and they're seeing that firsthand, or like you said, for those people that are impacted, are there concerns about national park employment as well as when we think about, I guess, the way that a national park operates as well, given the Central Valley is so closely tied to those Sequoia and Kings Canyon and Yosemite, and there's so much reliance upon those parks running smoothly as far as the tourism industry is concerned as well.
Exactly. I mean, California is going to be one state that's going to be impacted the worst from, you know, laying off these workers at the federal level, like workers, parks and recreation, and some others. I mean, I'm hearing stories like there's a couple that have worked for IRS, and now they both are being laid off. So in order to cope with that, they started they started doing Uber, basically, just to. I mean, the the impact on families, I mean, is tremendous. I mean, and then with the slowing economy, they're not likely to find jobs as they did in the past. So they're having devastating effects in families that we don't hear about.
And kind of circling back to the agricultural end and that double
Mhm.
end, I guess you should say this perfect storm of perhaps no storm, a storm of tariffs, but also drought conditions as well. I know we're going to get some rain this week. It's something that a lot of people are looking forward to. As you can see, I've been out in the rain earlier today. So, what I mean, what is the need for this rain to come right now, especially when we think about water releases that have since gone down to Southern California in the wake of some of the Los Angeles wildfires? How important is water coming to us, and of course, the retention of that water that we're getting?
Well, I mean, we're getting some rain. It's very good, but it's nowhere enough. We need to store more water for sure to fend us against long-lasting droughts. I mean, in 2021 alone, California suffered $1.7 billion just from drought, and it's not going away. So on top of that, we have, as an economically disadvantaged area here, on top of, those losses resulting from agriculture, we're gonna see the impact coming from tariffs. So it's not going to be pretty.
Yeah, and when we think about droughts as well, and the one that we're seeing right now at the moment, seems like some of the biggest drought hit areas are agricultural communities in southeast Kern County and Arvin and Lamont, and kind of the when we think about maybe one of the bread baskets and the many bread baskets of the Central Valley, it's kind of that southernmost terminus. What's the impact on those workers that are there? Because obviously we know what the impact is on the overall companies and cost of the supermarket, but what about those farm workers who are, especially now, also a number of which are threatened with immigration rates?
Yeah, they're going to lose their jobs, and the food quality will be impacted. The trees, the fruits and vegetables have to be picked by a certain amount of time, and if they don't, then we may be facing outbreaks like salmonella. So it is very concerning. I was thinking maybe to make up for that. I mean, did you see in the previous interview you had, there was a guy, a Republican, who was saying, well, Trump is gonna, go after undocumented immigrants, and it's not going to be farm workers. Well, we're seeing that's not true. So we're hearing stories of people, regardless of their legal or not, being taken away from the fields and leaving those produce lying there. So I had a lady saying, they were like 12 workers that they just went to pick some fruits, and then 11 of them were taken away, uh, uh, and only one was left. So it's affecting us here. Obviously, the worst. I mean, coming, from drought, being an area of unskilled area in terms of, 72% of the workforce is unskilled, and then we have the impact of tariffs. So we're going to be seeing the brunt of this effect here in the valley for sure. Southeast is going to be affected the most because that's where the drought effect is the highest. But here in the northern valley, the drought is moderate, but the amount of rain we're getting is nowhere enough to even not worry about irrigation and conditions that are going to affect uh, produce in a positive way from the standpoint of rainfall.
What do these next several months look like? Because there's the biggest, I think, news that came from last night's address was these reciprocal tariffs that could be coming in April. And just could you explain, I guess, what reciprocal tariffs mean? But my basic understanding would be that essentially what you get tariffed or what you tariff us, you're going to get tariffed right back.
Yeah, it's basically retaliation. I mean, if you increase tariffs, then they're going to increase tariffs, and there you go. You have uh, trade wars already starting. And it's a, I mean, these have been experimented with in the 1930s. They're not new, and we've seen over and over that it's a lose-lose situation. I mean, everybody loses under trade wars and competitive devaluations. The It's not new, and the outcome is obvious. So we need to find the new ways of uh, increasing economic growth and welfare in the in our country in the valley, and not resort to these tools that we've seen that have not worked in the past. In fact, they have a name called beggar thy neighbor policy, making basically you're making yourself better off at the expense of other countries. And of course, those countries are not naive, and they're retaliating. They're responding by retaliating, increasing their tariffs. So now you don't have free trade, you have protectionist measures, and that under that scenario, everybody loses. It's so obvious. So what we need to do is we need to become more competitive. I mean, we need to find new ways of staying competitive and ahead of the game. For example, so that's what we need is new ideas from this new administration, not experiment with those that have failed in the past. Maybe they're using it as a negotiating tactic. For example, I heard we heard on TV today that the attempts of Canada to fight fentanyl was not enough. Apparently, Trump decided to keep tariffs, excluding automotive industry. They gave a month extension. So maybe he's using it as a negotiating tactic, but even then, it's a dangerous one to resort to because it can quickly spiral out of control, as we've seen in the past, and it can lead to, physical conflicts. I mean, give you an example, the ripple effects I want to give you, like these convenience stores in the valley that provide check cashing operations, convenience stores that provide convenience stores that provide check cashing services. They're all indicating that it's empty out there. Nobody's coming to cash their checks. So now they're suffering. And then soon enough, they're going to have to lay off workers because they can't make money in the convenience store from check cashing operations. And so there you go. There's that indirect effect coming that's going to trickle down all the way to the average, a consumer in the valley.
And then my last question for you, just I want to tie it back to, I guess, new ideas, but this is, I guess, another older idea and one that we've talked about before, which is on gas-powered vehicles. You heard last night, it's his favorite line, "Drill, baby, drill," from President Trump when it comes to that. When it comes to the Central Valley, though, the Central Valley's been a bit restricted from the governor's office, also through CARB. I know we've talked before about the shift to try to push consumers towards electric vehicles. Is this something where California will miss out on? Is California going to experience any lower gas prices? Obviously, we'll be going to that summer blend sometime soon, so gas prices may be on the rise. That tends to be a little bit more expensive. But what were your thoughts on that series of remarks last night? Him wanting to reopen domestic drilling and American energy to new heights.
I don't think it's going to have a big impact. I mean, that's just only small portion of the entire production we're talking about. But we are seeing in the past few days that the price of oil is on the decline because of this growth scare that's occurring and the tariffs on automobiles. So it's gone down from $72 per barrel to now $66. So we might see some of that impact at the gas station when we're filling our tanks. Um, I wanted to say that this is dementia is starting to hit me. You know, I can't.
You already have enough medical,
Oh
ailments.
yeah, the Boeing. Yeah, see that to give you an example of how we're supposed to make ourselves more competitive, right? For for a very long number of years, Boeing was the only producer of passenger airplanes, right? And then Europe came up with Airbus and grabbed some of that market share. And now I hear that China has the passenger airplane that they're about to put it in the market there. But so we were ahead, right? We were ahead technology wise. We were the only producers of passenger airplanes. So we need to again find ways to stay ahead of the game. We need to find, for example, yes, stay competitive so that we can, be ahead of the game. So we need to take measures and give, grants to companies where they can come up with, new ways to fly so that you're still ahead of the game and you're the only producer of this new kind of passenger airplane. I mean, certainly there are some attempts, right, to come up with supersonic planes. So that's what we need, innovation, invention. These tariffs, they don't work, and if they're being used as a negotiating tactic, it's certainly a bad idea and definitely a dangerous one, as history shows us in the past, right? So yeah, it even has a name. I mean, beggar thy neighbor policy. I mean, how can you make yourself better off at the expense of your neighbor? I mean, that's not the way to do things, you know? I mean, if you put yourself in that place of neighbor, you're there, and then he's trying to make him, benefit at the expense of your own well-being. That's not going to go anywhere. I mean, plus we're isolating ourselves in the U.S. I mean, the only place we haven't really uh, picked an issue with is Antarctica, Even in Greenland, we've, I mean, that's not a way to, it's not a good way to make a nation better off by isolating yourself, like, other countries that have found that if they isolate themselves, they find out that in the past, it's not a good idea. I mean, you end up alone and nobody is trading with you. I mean, so pretty soon, we heard European Union is going to be slapped by tariffs. Uh, so, um, so I'm not sure if this is a good idea to, have everybody against you and expect to be economically better off. Yeah.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Well, and it's one of those situations where I'm sure the Trump administration makes the point. And I think that, his voter base, and even political experts will tell you maybe there's a decent amount of truth in that, and that the European Union hasn't been spending as much in defense. Whether or not that's a reason to break up negotiations with the continent and to slap on tariffs is another question. But until that day,
Well, yeah, I mean
uh,
the reason is right after Second World War. I mean, there was they couldn't arm basically, in particular Germany. I mean, Germany is still under the in, control of the United States. I mean, they can't talk. I mean, it's not like a independent country. So they think three times before coming up with a statement that's not gonna bode well with the U.S. policies in Europe. I mean, yeah. So it's the U.S. the European Union was created according to Trump to damage this destruct the United States. I mean, certainly that's a point of view, but competition, right? We compete with each other, and then competition. We also cooperate, and then we all become better off collectively. I mean, the idea is to become better off. Even then, there are some problems. I mean, even if everybody becomes better off, then even then there's a problem because if one country gains more than the other on a consistent basis, then that country is not going to be happy after a while, saying, "Hey, how come, I'll never be able to catch up with you?" I mean, imagine playing a poker game. In a poker game, you win, I win, but every time I win three times as much as you do. And after a while, you're going to say, "Hey, wait a minute, how come you're, gaining, making more, are you cheating? Are you gaining three times as much as I do every time we play?" You're not going to be happy with it.
Look, the amount of poker references I've had on interviews recently has been surprising.
Really?
But, Professor, thank you so much. Appreciate it as always.